Before the sun even rises, something hidden is already happening. Trucks roll across quiet roads carrying crates filled with live pheasants that are about to be released into the wild.
This is one of 41 pheasant release sites that we have across the province here to get pheasants out for hunters.
Most people think these birds come from nature, but they don't. The industry never talks about it. The truth is far darker and far more controlled than anyone expects.
Of heavy machinery being used to dump the bodies of hundreds of pheasants.
And the number of birds that actually survive is the part they truly don't want you to know. The illusion of the wild. Most people can picture the kind of hunting scene often shown in magazines or on television. A hunter walks across a field with his dog beside him. Suddenly, a pheasant flies up out of the grass. The hunter takes aim, fires, and the bird falls. The dog runs to bring it back. It looks like a genuine moment of nature, a man testing his skill in the wild, guided by instinct and tradition. That's the image people have come to associate with pheasant hunting. It seems natural, clean, and unchanged by time. But the reality behind that scene is very different. The truth is much less natural. What if that wild bird was actually raised in a factory? What if its entire life was managed for this single moment? The perfect scene is just a performance, made possible by a massive industry that changes everything we think about this tradition. The scale of this operation is the first clue that something very different is going on. Let's talk numbers. In the United Kingdom alone, approximately 47 million pheasants are released into the countryside every single year. That's not a mistake. 47 million. Add in another 10 million red-legged partridges, and the number becomes almost abstract. It's more birds than there are people in the entire country. This isn't a small-scale pastime. This is a giant, multi-million-pound industry running on a production schedule. And that scale forces a very simple but very awkward question. Where do all these birds actually come from? Nature is messy and unpredictable. It doesn't provide a consistent, perfectly timed product. Wild populations have boom and bust cycles. They struggle with the weather and disease. They cannot guarantee that tens of millions of identical, healthy birds will be ready for hunters on the first day of the season. But the industry does. So how? The answer isn't found in the wild woods or the windswept prairies. The answer is hidden in plain sight, in a supply chain the industry isn't eager for you to examine. Here is the first piece of evidence. Take a close look at any picture of a successful pheasant hunt. Look at the birds lined up after a day's shoot. You will start to notice something strange, something that defies nature. They all look incredibly similar. They are almost identical in size and weight. Their plumage, those brilliant iridescent feathers, is consistently spectacular. Each rooster sports that perfect, unbroken white ring around its neck like a uniform. In a truly wild, naturally breeding population, you would see variation. You would see older, scarcer birds and younger, smaller ones. The colors would vary in intensity. Some birds would be lankier, others more stout. That's how nature works. It thrives on diversity. But in these photos, you see conformity. You see a standardized product. This uniformity is a silent confession. It is the undeniable sign that you are not looking at a wild animal. You are looking at the result of intensive selective breeding. You are looking at a living product, designed in a facility, raised in a pen, and placed on the land, all part of a calculated plan. The genetic vault. So if these birds aren't simply wild pheasants, what are they? The answer lies not in a forest, but in a genetic vault. The bird bursting from the cover isn't a random product of nature. It is a carefully designed hybrid, the result of decades of selective breeding. Think of it like the difference between a wild wolf and the hundreds of specialized dog breeds we have today. They are the same species, but one is natural and the other is engineered for a purpose. This is agricultural science applied to wildlife, creating a living product tailored for a very specific market. The ring-necked pheasant is the basic model. But the birds released by the millions are specialized strains, proprietary lines owned and managed by game farms. The breeding goals have nothing to do with survival in the wild and everything to do with profit and sport. This is not evolution by natural selection. This is evolution by boardroom decision, where the bottom line dictates which genes get passed on. The first and most important trait is a rapid flight instinct. These birds are bred to flush fast and fly hard. A bird that flies slowly or hides too well doesn't provide a challenging target. So the breeders selectively choose the birds that explode into the air most dramatically. It's all about creating a better, more exciting sporting experience for the hunter. This isn't a wild animal escaping a threat, it's a product performing its primary function. Its instincts sharpened not by the struggle for life, but by selective breeding programs documented in industry guidelines. The second trait is all about appearance. That classic picture-perfect look with the iridescent copper and gold body and the perfect white ring around the neck is not an accident. It is a requirement. Birds that don't meet the aesthetic standard are culled from the breeding program. The market expects a certain look, and the industry delivers it with genetic precision. In the world of manufactured game, a pheasant must not only act the part, but look the part perfectly every single time. But perhaps the most crucial trait of all happens long before the hunting season. It's high egg production. A hen in the wild might lay a dozen eggs in a clutch. A hen in the industrial breeding system is pushed to lay 60, 70, or even more eggs in a single season. Her body is treated as a production unit. The profitability of the entire operation hinges on maximizing the number of eggs each bird can produce. This drive for volume is straight out of the commercial poultry industry's playbook, where life is measured in output and efficiency. So, where does this high-tech genetic engineering actually happen? The setting might surprise you. The reality of these breeding farms is a world away from the open fields we imagine. To maintain these pure genetic lines and control the breeding process, the parent birds are often kept in high-density pens. These are not spacious, natural environments. They are crowded enclosures, often covered with netting to prevent escape. The scene is one of intense management, not wild freedom. Investigations by animal welfare groups have documented the use of small, barren cages for breeding birds, a system that mirrors the battery cages of the egg industry. In these confined conditions, the natural behaviors of these magnificent birds are severely restricted. The focus is not on animal welfare, but on efficiency and output. The goal is to protect the valuable genetics and extract the maximum number of eggs at the lowest possible cost. This is the hidden foundation of the entire system. This is the fundamental secret. The very foundation of the entire hunting tradition, the bird itself, is a manufactured product. Its genetics are curated for profit, its instincts are tuned for sport, and its parents often live a life of intense confinement. The wild pheasant is a myth. What flies from the field is a patented product of human design, created in a system that values consistency and volume above all else. The illusion of nature is so complete that we never stop to question the bird itself. But once you know the truth, the picture of the noble wild bird flushed from its natural habitat changes forever, revealing a much more complicated and industrial reality. The smuggling pipeline. So we have these genetically standardized birds, bred for specific traits. But the story of how they get to the hunting fields gets even stranger. The next piece of the puzzle involves a massive cross-continental operation that turns the idea of a local wild bird completely on its head. Imagine a hunter on an old English estate. A pheasant bursts from the brush, and it feels like a classic British tradition. But here's the twist. That bird was probably never meant to be British at all. A huge number of the pheasants released in the UK every year, tens of millions of them, begin their lives abroad. They are imported as fragile eggs or day-old chicks from other countries, primarily from France and other parts of Europe. Official government import statistics show this constant flowing pipeline of game birds entering the country. This isn't a minor side business, it's a fundamental part of the supply chain. The entire system relies on this international trade. So that wild British pheasant is often a French citizen on paper, making a journey of hundreds of miles before it ever sees a British field. The tradition is local, but the product is utterly globalized. This international secret creates a gigantic problem, one with the potential to cause an ecological and agricultural disaster. That problem is bird flu, or avian influenza. This is a highly contagious and deadly virus that can wipe out entire flocks of birds, both farmed and wild. When you have millions of eggs and chicks constantly moving across borders, you create a perfect highway for disease. The Animal and Plant Health Agency constantly monitors outbreaks, and game farms have been right at the center of these crises. When a disease outbreak happens, the government imposes strict control zones, shutting down movement. But the industry's demand for birds is relentless. This creates an intense pressure to keep the supply chain moving, even when it's incredibly risky. This global secret doesn't just hide the origin of the birds. It hides a massive vulnerability that threatens all bird life. And where there is high demand and strict regulation, a black market inevitably emerges. This is the darkest corner of the secret pipeline. Investigative journalists from major newspapers have uncovered networks illegally smuggling game bird eggs into the UK. We're not talking about drugs or weapons, but pheasant eggs being smuggled in specially designed vests and packages. Why would anyone go to such lengths? Because the legal routes can be shut down by disease outbreaks or paperwork. The financial incentives are so high that criminals step in to fill the gap. These smuggled eggs bypass all biosecurity checks, potentially carrying diseases right into the heart of the countryside. This isn't just a quirky story. It's a serious biosecurity failure happening for the sake of sport. So the picture becomes clear. The bird in the field is often an international traveler. It might have been conceived in France, hatched from an egg that may or may not have passed through legal channels, and then released in England. Its journey is a secret, hidden behind complex trade agreements and sometimes outright crime. The risk it carries with it, the threat of a devastating disease, is a secret too. The entire system is built on a foundation that is not just industrial, but also transnational and fragile, all to maintain the illusion of a wild local bird for that single dramatic moment when it flies. The puppet master. For a captive-bred pheasant, the journey to the hunting field involves one crucial middle stage: the release pen. This is the halfway house between the farm and the wild, a carefully managed space where the bird is supposed to learn how to be wild. But is it a genuine wilderness school, or just the final step in manufacturing a target? These release pens are massive, netted enclosures, often built in woodlands. In the UK, it's estimated that a staggering one in every 12 woodlands in England contains one. They are designed to be a secure boot camp. The fence is typically 2 meters high, often with an extra overhanging net to stop foxes from climbing in, and buried or pegged into the ground to stop predators from digging their way in. Inside, the environment is engineered to mimic nature, with a mix of sunny spots, low cover for shelter, and shrubs for roosting. The goal is simple: to get the birds used to their surroundings before the hunting season begins, giving them a chance to learn to roost in trees and avoid ground predators. This is where the process known as hardening happens. For several weeks, the young pheasants, called poults, live in these pens to acclimatize. They are weaned off processed feed and encouraged to forage for wild food. The pens are equipped with re-entry funnels, special holes that allow the birds to venture out into the wider world, but also find their way back to the safety and familiar feeding stations of the pen. This technique, developed in Britain, is meant to prevent the birds from simply wandering off and getting lost. It's a controlled taste of freedom. The entire system is designed to hold the birds in a specific area, often using special cover crops and feeding stations to ensure they are present in the right locations for shoot days. The British guidance is to release no more than 1,000 birds per hectare of pen. with a lower density of 700 per hectare in more sensitive ancient woodlands. This highly managed process leads to a pressing ethical question. Where is the line between a managed hunt and a manufactured one? The very term fair chase is called into question. From the quarry's perspective, the concept of a sporting chance is central to the debate. As one ethical discussion points out, a truly wild pheasant has little chance against a shotgun. However, when a bird has been bred in captivity, lived in a pen until a few weeks before the hunt, and is drawn to a specific area by feeders, can the hunt be considered a fair contest? Or is it the simulation of one? The industry argues that this management provides the birds with a good life, and that the shooting provides an ethical source of meat. Critics, however, might see a bird that has been habituated to a controlled environment not as a wild animal, but as a target placed in the field. The pen is the final step in creating a product that looks and flies like a wild pheasant, but whose life has been entirely orchestrated for one purpose. The body count. Now we come to the most shocking part of the story. It's a numbers game, and the numbers tell a story of staggering waste. Forget the image of the successful hunter for a moment. The real story is what happens to the millions of birds that never make it to that moment. The moment a pheasant is released from its pen, the clock starts ticking. And for most, that clock runs out incredibly fast. Peer-reviewed research, like a pivotal 2020 study, has tracked the fate of these birds. The findings are bleak. A mere 12 days after release, only about 40% of the birds are still alive. That means of every 10 birds set free, 6 are already dead within 2 weeks. They are not dying by a hunter's gun. They are being taken by foxes, birds of prey, and other natural predators. They succumb to diseases they have no immunity against. They simply starve, unable to properly fend for themselves in a world they were never truly prepared for. The system is built expecting this catastrophic loss. It's a planned, accepted part of the business model. Millions of birds are bred and released precisely because the industry knows that most of them will simply become food for something else. This massive, constant delivery of naive prey creates what ecologists call a predator trap. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet that never closes. Areas around release sites see fox and crow populations artificially boom because there is such an easy, abundant food source. But this doesn't just affect the released pheasants. This inflated predator population then turns its attention to everything else. The eggs of vulnerable ground-nesting birds like curlews and lapwings, species that are already in serious trouble, become easy targets. So, the release of millions of non-native pheasants actively harms native wildlife by fueling the predators that hunt them. Then there is the most public and visible sign of this waste: the roads. In the United Kingdom, it is estimated that millions of pheasants are killed by vehicles every single year. They become a common squashed feature on country lanes. For drivers, they are a hazard. For the public, it's a confusing sight. But why are there so many pheasants on the road? The answer is simple. These are not wise wild birds that have learned to avoid traffic. These are disoriented, pen-raised animals with no road sense. They wander onto the tarmac without a hint of fear. Each one is a testament to a system that produces life but does not prepare it for the world it enters. The roadkill is the part of the secret that we can all see if we only know what we're looking at. So the final picture is this: a system that breeds millions of birds, only for them to vanish into the jaws of predators, die of sickness, or be splattered on asphalt. It is a cycle of creation and destruction on an industrial scale, all to ensure that a fraction of the original number remains for a few months of sport. The hunt is just the very tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface lies a hidden mountain of death and waste that the industry depends on to function. The silent partners. Now this is where it all gets complicated. The industry has a powerful counter-argument, one that often frames the entire conversation. It's the claim of conservation. Supporters say that without game shooting, the countryside would be a far less diverse and managed place. And on the surface, there is some truth to this. Shooting estates have a direct financial incentive to manage the land in a way that supports game birds. This often involves practices that can benefit other wildlife. The Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust points out that this can include planting new woodlands, maintaining and planting thick, bushy hedgerows for cover, and creating wildflower patches. These habitats do not exist in intensive, modern agriculture, so in many areas, the shooting estate is the only organization investing in this kind of landscape management. It creates pockets of habitat in an otherwise simplified environment. But is this a genuine conservation effort, or is it more like a deal with the devil? To understand that, we need to look at what kind of nature is being created. The goal is not a balanced, natural ecosystem. The goal is to produce a maximum number of pheasants. This leads to what scientists call ecological distortion. The habitat is often managed to create a monoculture for a single, non-native species. A pivotal 2018 study by Madden and others looked closely at this. They found that woodlands intensively managed for game shooting showed lower overall biodiversity. The practices like excessive predator control and the dense release of pheasants actually had a negative effect on many native woodland species. You might get more pheasants, but you lose the delicate balance of insects, birds, and plants that make a woodland truly wild and healthy. It's like planting a field of nothing but corn and calling it a diverse prairie. The system is engineered for one product, and everything else becomes collateral damage. The habitat is shaped for the benefit of the released pheasant, often to the detriment of the natural community. The very predators that are controlled are a natural part of the ecosystem. The dense populations of pheasants can damage forest undergrowth through overgrazing and introduce diseases. So, while there may be more hedgerows, they are often part of a simplified and manipulated environment that struggles to function as a true, self-sustaining ecosystem. This growing understanding of the ecological cost has triggered a political response. The government's conservation agency, Natural England, announced a significant new policy in 2020. For the first time, they introduced a licensing scheme for the release of game birds on and near protected wildlife sites. The reason? Evidence showed that the sheer volume of pheasants was causing significant damage to these sensitive habitats. This has become a major battleground. The industry argues it is being unfairly targeted, while conservationists see it as a necessary first step to control an industrial activity masquerading as a rural tradition. The license is a formal admission that the system has a dark side, one that can no longer be ignored by simply pointing to the hedgerows it plants. The question then becomes, what are we conserving? Are we preserving a functioning natural ecosystem, or are we gardening the countryside to produce a single type of bird for sport? The shooting estate may look green and managed, but true conservation is about more than just appearance. It is about the health of the entire web of life, not just the abundance of one imported species. This complicated deal forces us to ask whether the price of these pretty landscapes is the very wildness we claim to protect. The revelation. So here we are. We've followed the trail from the genetic breeding farms to the international smuggling routes, from the training pens to the shocking mathematics of waste. We've peeled back every layer. It's no longer secret that the entire system is an industrial apparatus, a global machine that manufactures a wild experience. Think about everything we've seen. It begins with a bird that is genetically designed in a vault, its very DNA tailored for a specific flight pattern and a perfect appearance. That bird's life often starts in another country, its egg or young chick shipped across borders in a complex supply chain that risks disease and even fosters a black market. It is then raised in a controlled environment, a pen that acts as a halfway house, trying to teach it a version of wildness it was bred to forget. And finally, it is released into a world where the system expects, and even depends on, the vast majority of them dying quickly from predators, disease, or simple starvation. This isn't a natural cycle. This is a production line. From the selective breeding to the international logistics to the managed release, every step is calculated for one purpose: to provide a product for a seasonal sport. The industry isn't desperately hiding a single piece of paperwork or a lone terrible facility. What it is protecting is far more valuable: the brand. The brand is the myth of the wild traditional hunt. The brand is the story of the skilled hunter and the cunning wild bird. It is the crisp autumn morning and the timeless ritual. That story is what sells. That story is what makes the tradition feel authentic and noble. The moment you pull back the curtain and see the geneticists, the international traders, the gamekeepers managing the pens, and the shocking body count, the entire illusion shatters. The wild bird is revealed as a recently delivered commodity. The pristine nature is revealed as a carefully managed stage. They aren't hiding a crime, they are protecting a story, because the story is the product. This revelation isn't necessarily about ending hunting. It is about starting a transparent conversation. This is about moving from a fantasy to a reality. Now that you know the truth, you can see the sport for what it is. It is a pastime built on a foundation of modern industry and intense management. The question is, how does that knowledge change your perception? Does knowing that the bird was bred in captivity, potentially smuggled across a channel and released from a pen just weeks ago, make the hunt more impressive? Or does it make it something else entirely? Does understanding the sheer scale of waste behind the scenes alter the feeling of tradition? The power is no longer in the secret, it is in the informed choice. In the end, this is about more than just pheasants. This is a powerful story about the human desire to control nature. We have a deep-seated need to experience the wild, but we also want that experience to be convenient, abundant, and on our own terms. So we build a system that gives us the look and feel of wilderness without the unpredictability. We manufacture the wild because the real wild is too fragile, too scarce, and too uncontrollable. The pheasant is a symbol of that compromise. It is a creature that represents our longing for nature and our relentless determination to manage it, package it, and sell it back to ourselves. The greatest secret isn't where the birds come from. It's the story we tell ourselves to justify the entire elaborate production.